Take it with the programming. I'm Chase Ingram.
I'm Captain America.
And along with me is Bill Grundler.
Wolverine.
We've got one more.
You've got a friend in me.
I think that was 7 seconds because that's what I heard the magic number is. And
I think I was safe. Well, see, there's a lot of positive things there. One, you didn't mess up yours. I didn't have YouTube on and blast out my ears and have to yell. Brian came on smooth with his music. I mean,
I was trying to hit the
that's 3 for 3, dude.
Camera
We already won.
Hit the thing. I even put it in GarageBand and cut it to 6.9 seconds because I heard 7 is the magic number. So Brian Friend is joining the show today as we analyze the programming of the Madrid CrossFit Championship. However, you have really been all over Europe, I would say, in the last 2 or 3 weeks, and you are located where now?
Halmstad, Sweden, on the coast of the North Sea.
So I saw you with Roger. Was that earlier today?
Yeah, I met his whole family. It's amazing.
How's he doing?
His family has gotten big fast.
They got a 3-year-old and a 9-month-old.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think the last time I saw Roger, I think that was both of us when we were in Amsterdam together. And he was talking about one on the
We were
way.
reminiscing on it today.
Yeah. Oh, really? That was a good time. That's a good time. What do you guys think about my camera setup? I changed it today. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about it. I feel like more exposed.
Well, you are. I mean, I hope you're wearing pants, is all I say, because we got all the rest of you right now.
There. Here's the desk.
Right.
My desk is kind of off. And then, my wife got a new office chair, so she gave me her old one.
Are you just spinning circles right now?
Well, I've been in a fold-out chair, like the ones you take to a soccer game.
Nice.
And so I upgraded to my wife's downgrade. I get all her office hand-me-downs because she's the real professional in the family. But Brian, how's the tour been, man? You were I want to say you went Finland to where Pitteen, and then
Utah in between.
Oh yeah, God, Iron Game. Was it Utah first?
Finland, Iron Game, then Pitteen Throwdown, yeah.
And then Madrid. And now you're in Sweden. What's coming up in Sweden?
Halmstad Throwdown. There's not a broadcast. It's not a major or big event for elite athletes. There are a couple athletes like Victor Longsved, I believe, is competing here, but it's all teams. There's 400 total athletes. There's men's, women's, and mixed teams for RX, intermediate, and scale divisions. But Roger Grios is hosting it. He hosts, I think, 8 competitions every year now between Norway and Sweden.
He loves that stuff. He loves that stuff. You give that guy a microphone, and he is fired up. Seriously, he's rad.
So I just reached out to him because I knew that this year I would have more opportunity to travel, and I was like, "Hey, when are your competitions?" And I was hoping that there was one that was when I was already in Europe that I didn't have something to get back for. And this worked out perfectly. So I asked him if I could come. He's like, "Why do you want to come to that one?" And I'm like, "I just want to see you work. I want to see the show that you produce because you run more competitions annually than anyone I know."
Right.
And he's like, "Perfect. Come on out. I'll take care of you." So I'm here.
Nice.
Yeah,
nice.
awesome.
Does he, I don't remember, does he also own or run an affiliate?
He's a manager for CrossFit Furuset in Norway.
Dude, I don't know. I've put on one event a year for several years, and Brian came out to one of them. And that's enough to where I don't want to do it again for another year, and then 4 months to the date, I'm like, all right, maybe we'll do it again. I cannot imagine doing 8.
Yeah.
What is that? One every 6 weeks?
I actually had a conversation with Joe last week that I met down there in Dallas.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he reached out, so I had a nice conversation with him. It was to catch up with him again.
Yeah,
I think it takes a special kind of person to want to be able to put on events like that, because most of the time it's not like that's going to be your financial ticket. You're not going to get a ton of money or anything like that. But I know he loves the guy, dude, Roger's a showman. He loves to just put on a show, and not that he has to be the center of attention, but he loves to make a spectacle and have people just like get after it, whatever it is, and just fire people up. Like he puts a lot of energy into every single one of those. It's not like, he'll go big for the big ones and just kind of kick back for the back ones. That guy, he's all in all the time. It's awesome.
Well, also like emceeing at or certain events, or he like ran to the community side at Roland's 2 years ago. Like he's all in. I love it.
Yeah.
It was today because we were like the equipment arrived today. We did a tour of the venue. We went to Eleiko's factory today. I got a full tour of Eleiko's factory, including watching them manufacture a barbell and package it.
Oh, wow.
It was like I never thought I would get. It was like really cool, kind of a surreal experience. But throughout the day, he was actually educating me on some of the economics and the like business side of running these competitions, which is one of the reasons I wanted to come, is because I felt like I could learn a lot from him, and so far I have been.
From the ones you've been to this year alone, I mean, I know you've been to a bunch. We've all been together at several of these, but the cool thing I think you're doing now is that like you are going big to small to intermediate to like the Madrid is Wadapalooza level. If we think about sheer number of athletes competing in divisions and very similar to that, what are some of the things that you're picking up on that maybe you didn't know about previously?
Well, for people that care to have the really deep dive, Patrick and I are doing a show. It's a world tour, whatever show after every stop on the tour. And I'm writing memoirs. The memoirs would be for people who care more about competition organization and programming. And then the conversation on YouTube touches on that a little bit, but it's more about that. It's probably more focused on the athletes. And so those are kind of the two aspects that I would say that I'm really learning about and realize, first of all, I try to have as big of a scope of understanding of the competitive athletes in CrossFit at the high level that I can. But on the other side, I think it is much more about the organization, business, and like execution level of these competitions from big to small, and identifying best practices, basically the things that work regardless of who you're hosting the competition for. But sometimes the buckets change. Like if you want to have a broadcast, that's a total game than if you don't. If you want to have a big prize purse, there's some things that should probably be considered on the judging and scoring and programming side that matter more than if you don't have a big prize much on the line necessarily. But those are all kind of woven in, embedded into the writing and the conversations that I've been doing with Patrick.
That'll be really interesting because we keep talking about the off season, right? And what are these athletes going to be doing in between, and what's what does a Grand Prix look like if it is something like that, or how are these other things going to happen? And the only way you can really do that is by gleaning from the best that's out there, not just who do you invite, what kind of prize purse you need to have, but how do you make it run? How do you run that setup to where it's professional enough to be handled, it's done correctly enough so that you have the right athletes showing up there, and that you have community-based still where you have that the audience and the community involvement, whether it's scaled intermediate competitors or just being able to open up the door so that fans can come and want to watch. I mean, a lot of times it's like just getting people there. You can have this great competition, but if you don't have ticket sales, that program's not going to be running next year. So it's like trying to figure out, and I think that's great that you're doing that, Brian, is seeing what those best practices are, what's working, what's not working. And the only way you can really do that is by seeing a lot of those events from behind the curtain, not out in front to see, the programming is this, and look at this athlete that showed up. It's all the behind the scenes stuff. That's huge.
Well, and this week, I'm not doing any broadcast. I will maybe do some stuff on social media with them, but I'm competing in the competition. So I'll get that perspective as well.
Is this the pairs thing?
Yes, this is kind of cool. So it's there's an RX intermediate and scaled. I'm doing intermediate men's teams of 2. Nice. The RX division runs on both Saturday and Sunday. I believe the scaled athletes compete on Saturday and intermediate on Sunday. So they have one-day competition, three events. My partner is a business partner of Rogers, who's also the personal trainer for a guy named Marcus Ericsson, who's an IndyCar driver. He used to be an F1 driver for 7 years. They just got back from a tour all over the U.S., and he actually got back to Sweden after more like closer to the competition than I did. So he's probably going to be a little jet lagged, but he's definitely in better shape than me.
Along the line what Bill was talking about, and then we'll get into the programming for Madrid, is the question of the health of the, I would say, competition landscape, right? Putting on events takes a lot of time, energy, money, volunteers, but we do want to make sure is that people are coming out to watch these things, or they're exciting, or there's a lot of energy around this. Is being everywhere. Like, how have you seen maybe that represented in all of these different competitions you've been at so far?
Can you ask that again?
Just the people showing up to watch these things, or the vibe of these events, right? We want to see that there is a healthy growth, because there was a time where maybe there were too many off-season events, big or small, didn't really matter, or the way they were run, people maybe were getting jaded or burned out or not involved. Is like, how have you seen the community show up for these events?
Massive variability. I would say relative to what the competition was, the Finland competition that I did was the most well attended from a spectator perspective. Like, it
Really?
was, the venue that they had was packed. It is, this is like the perfect day, the best days of the year. It's an outdoor event. The city sponsors the competition. It's one of I think it's the third biggest city in Finland, and that, I think, is actually a huge factor. And I know that there were representatives from Madrid, the city of Madrid, that were at the Madrid Championships that are interested in working with them to promote the event and help push it forward next year as well, or at least that's what they were there to investigate if they wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a huge help. I've actually, as part of being on the road, I've had a chance to talk to some other competitions that I'm not working with, who have seen me doing some stuff and reached out, and they've told me the opposite, that like the country or the city does not support their event. They almost are like pushing against it, and that's a massive
Interesting.
challenge, and it drives costs up, and it's prohibitive.
Mm-hmm.
So that, I would say that, and their perspective is, we want to change that culture. We're going to fight against it because we believe in this thing. But if that's a place that you're in that doesn't have the support of the city or the country, that's super challenging. Next week I'm going to Norway, and in Norway, the government funds functional fitness as a national
Oh,
sport. So that's a massive
is that why the
advantage. I think in
IF3
Sweden it's
is
also,
out of there mainly?
yes, and they're having the World Championships there, I think in
Okay.
November, which was thinking about attending from an educational perspective, but I already have competitions booked for that time. The pit team throwdown was pretty good, but you'd expect that because it's all the parents and
Right.
they just want to watch their kids.
And they had to drive them.
Uh, yeah, yeah, and then like Iron Games is way out there. Like, I don't know if you guys have gone to that, but it's a difficult location to get to. Whether you fly into Salt Lake or Vegas, it's at least a 3-hour drive. There are flights into Cedar City, but they're few and they're expensive. So that's a logistical challenge. And Madrid was, I mean, you guys, if you've been to Caja Mágica, it's a massive venue. They had 3 floors, 2,800 athletes. So there were people everywhere, but the stands in the main arena weren't full even on the busiest day. They were getting fuller and fuller every day, but they didn't pack it out. So it was hard to kind of gauge because it looked kind of empty, but I know there were
Right.
a couple thousand people
Yeah.
in there.
Well, that's interesting.
Um,
Very interesting. And have you learned anything from how these events that get to work with the cities or the countries, how that process works? And maybe it's like, okay, it would be great if cities in the US would be as supportive about this from a sports and gaming perspective or event perspective, I would say.
Yeah. So two things is like, I think Madison is actually a decent example of how they embrace the city. And when you were there for the CrossFit Games, even if if you just lived in the city and you didn't know that was going on, you would know it was going on because you'd see these billboards around the town, you'd see these advertisements, you'd see menus at your favorite restaurants that were like, what is this, CrossFit menu? What is this? You'd be curious about it. So it's driving interest, or at least curiosity, just by promoting the event. And in Turku in Finland, the city that has it, that was the same. There were banners promoting it, and like, if you're in the town, you knew it was happening. It was advertised basically. So that's an advantage. And then the other one that I think is a big one, is interesting here, is they don't drive up the cost for the venues because they know that a high percentage of the competitors are traveling
Okay.
here. So they recognize that the people traveling here will buy hotel rooms, and they'll go to bars, and they'll buy restaurants, and they'll take the public transportation. So they know that there's going to be money coming into their ecosystem, and they don't need to have exorbitant costs for their venues because they're supporting an event that supports their community by bringing in people from outside the
Hey,
community.
Brian, let me ask you one thing. I just saw this when I was kind of looking through some of the stuff on the game site. And I went into competition because I thought it was the game. I was going to try and look at some workout from before.
I know where you went.
But the number of licensed CrossFit events, from the events that you have now seen, have all of them been licensed CrossFit events or no?
I know that Turun Tuomiopäivä in Finland was. I believe the Pit Throwdown. I know that Madrid Championship. This one is not, and I can't remember about Iron Games. But I do think that there's a massive opportunity for CrossFit to have, it's not even a lot of effort to have an impact on promoting the CrossFit licensed events. That's something that I really hope happens.
Do you think that that's actually, I mean, maybe it's almost kind of like, even kind of like teeters on the line of, why would someone want to be a CrossFit affiliate? Because they actually get to say CrossFit in it rather than just, Joe Bob strength and conditioning. Do these events get more kind of clout because it's a CrossFit event rather than a throwdown or a functional fitness or whatever? I really would be interested to see, like, as you're going through all these things and talking to these people, if that really is making it work. Because I was shocked that there were that many right now that are licensed. I had no idea.
Yeah.
Had no idea.
Right now, yeah, there are quite a few. And right now, I would say that CrossFit could do a better job of supporting those without a lot of extra work. And it's something that I'm quite hopeful that happens. I think that, I watch a lot of disc golf, and I follow the disc golf network. And it's like when one event's happening, so like last week, Madrid, that's a licensed event. When that's happening, they're advertising the events that are happening next week. And then I get interested in it. Like I finished the Madrid Championships, and I'm like, oh, what's next week? There's this competition. Cool.
You would think that they would be connected. I mean, they're all licensed by, so you'd think that they would kind of pump that somehow.
There's tiers, I believe, too, to the licensing.
True.
I'm not 1, 2, or 3 might be the tier.
Huh.
What I would like to see is one that Brian's talking about is a promotion of that, a worldwide calendar that can be sorted by state and city that has events in your area. So now you say you're tier 1 and say it's $500. I don't know what it is. Like,
and
it gets you on the count and country.
International.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
Searchable by, let's say, location on a calendar, and it connects to your registration site. So if I'm like, hey, I'm in Dallas, Texas, I want to pull up the calendar for all events happening in Dallas, Texas for the month of November. Like, I think that should be at a bare minimum. There's some of that. But I would love to see is like that last tier, something like the Madrid CrossFit Championship of whatever that financial number is. Like they put on a broadcast, but I was talking with Hanu today, and like the broadcast itself, like the pictures, graphics, camera, like that was legit. The fact, did they have like a boom in there, like a crane?
Yeah, a massive crane. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. When you start pulling out a crane camera for a broadcast, right? This is legit. I would love to see, say, on the game site, them at least host the feed from there too. Like all they have to do is just open up the front page. Like, this is our top tier CrossFit license event. You can watch it on YouTube via our CrossFit game site, like that.
Right.
Or put it on .com, like however you want to put those things together. But I think these bigger tiers.
Or look for the Pit Throwdown, Adrian Bosman was there. And he reposted the story. Dave Castro reposted the link.
Game's Instagram posted it, and they don't repost anything that nobody else, like outside of what they do, is, which I thought was freaking.
Well, that's what I mean. Like they should have some sort of connection
for the
like
top
that.
Tier, that's an easy thing to do. It doesn't take a lot of work.
Yeah, just hey, here's the live feed. You can watch it through here. Then it brings more eyes to the live stream through another entity. Which if they've done in the past, I feel like they did that for Dubai one year, maybe. But
yeah, they've done that. Like when they were doing the sanctionals and stuff, they would host those up.
Exactly.
Right? And I think what happened was when the licensing started, it was more like a look. we're going to go hands off. You guys do your thing, but we'll let you put the name on it. So here's the licensing agreement, the licensing amount, whatever it is, and just kind of go with it. I don't know if they really decide. It was just kind of like easy money. It's like if I have a templated workout program, I'm not gonna put a lot of work into it. I'm gonna keep the price down so I get a lot of people to do it, rather than saying like, okay, now we're gonna push these because now we want to say that like, hey, these are our people. This is one of our big events, and that idea of having that tiered setup, that's huge. Well, I mean, absolutely, it should be. There should be, on the main site, those things should be popping up. On the CrossFit Games site, those things should be popping up. I mean, they already put up a bunch of posts anyway. Advertise, throw up their next event, the next licensed event that's coming up. Why not? We're paying for it. I think that's fair.
Let's see. I'll pull this up. I don't get off track, but this is a great conversation.
Well, I think Brian, you get
CrossFit license event application. License event. Functional fitness competition where organizers can use the CrossFit license event icon, your name plus CrossFit license events. You get put on the games website in the competition sections. Eligible, you must have a level 1 certificate. Okay. The event organizer owns an affiliate or is sponsored by an affiliate. Insurance, participation waiver, judges. All judges must take an online CrossFit judges course. Annual fee of $1,000 a year. To be a licensed event, you get a $300 discount for affiliate owners.
Roger told me today, it's like, it's not very expensive. It's like the amount I spent on pizza on a weekend for my staff. Something like, something like that. He said, all judges take the judges course is an interesting one. I don't know if they're monitoring that or not.
Yeah, probably not yet, but maybe if they change the judges course.
Hey, was NorCal a licensed event?
I don't believe so.
Yeah.
I don't think it was.
It seemed to get a little more support from some important people at CrossFit than some of the licensed events.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the feathers in your cap of being relatively close to those people.
Yeah,
locale wise, yeah. But you're right.
Yeah,
I mean, yeah.
Hey, if I'm Madrid and I see that I don't care about that. It's like I paid to be the licensed event. They didn't, and you're going there and promoting their event, and you didn't say one thing about ours.
Totally. But that's also
I want to feel good.
That
about
also comes down to when you say you're going to license. Like, is there other than then maybe it's just that it's like, okay, you're paying your $1,000 or $700. What you get out of that is nothing extra other than you get to say CrossFit on there. So whether they're promoting or not promoting, I'm not saying that it's right. I'm not saying anything like that, but it's like, what are the expectations of that $1,000? You know what I mean?
Oh, like that.
Hey,
dang.
Yeah. There you go.
Sick.
I love it. Well, hey, on that front, as we'll step into the program here for Madrid, I think there's a lot of untapped potential to support these off-season competitions, especially if they're CrossFit licensed. And again, there's a lot of moving parts within the company and a lot of things. I mean, if you think about priority shifts between that, sure, but that would be a fun rabbit hole to go down, is maybe revamping the license agreement for these competitions in some type of tiered system and what could come with that.
Totally.
And I will say this, based on some conversations that I've had, I do believe that there are personnel in place and intent for that to happen. But there's a difference between intent and follow through. So we will see.
Yes, there is. Well, let's go to the Madrid CrossFit Championship. That ended last weekend. Brian, can you remember that? It was 4 days?
For the elite athletes, it was 4 days, 7 tests, 2-1, 2-2. All the other divisions had 3 days. There were 2,800 total athletes participating, including the elite divisions. So a massive production, and also an elite level competition globally that was, high caliber, big prize purse and broadcast.
What was the prize
it's a big undertaking
for this?
I know that they only pay out 3 spots, but it's 30,000, 15,000, and 6,000 euros. 1, 2, 3 for the men and women, and then the teams was like 20,000, 10,000, 5,000, or something like that. It was divisible by 4, so it was like 20,000, 12,000, 6,000 maybe.
And they had a huge broadcast, which you got to be a part of. And then is it Greg?
Greg
Yeah.
Langto. Yeah, first ever live broadcast for him. He's a MC.
I remember him
I would say
from
he's one
the
of the
West.
best French MCs in
Yeah.
the world. He does the French Throwdown. He did Lowlands with us. He was out there. He does a lot. He's got a big history going back in Montreal and Eastern Canada. He used to compete on regionals teams. He's good friends with Michel Letendre, Pat Vellner. He's been around for a long time.
Yeah.
And a good friend
And I
of
was
mine.
going to say, is like, I think he's Canadian.
Yeah, he's from Montreal.
But a huge broadcast. What type of feedback did you hear from the athletes of this 7-event format across 4 days? Where, I mean, 2, 1, 2, 2, and one just being like a lift day. Like, what type of feedback did you get from them?
If you could get to it, we'll talk
All right,
about
we'll get
that.
there. All right. All right.
I would say this. I would say that the big feedback at the end of the weekend was, I'm not destroyed by this competition, and I'm happy about
Oh, that's
that.
good. Oh,
That's a
especially for an
plus.
off season, right?
That's a plus.
Unlike the early Dubai days. Where I was
Oh,
like,
dude.
oh God.
Hey, even last year at Rogue, the athletes were really unhappy. They're like, I did not want to feel this bad at the end of this competition. It's a total disruption of my off season. And at Wadapalooza, if you did both the
That was
teams and
Pat and
individuals,
Brent
is
was
the
talking
same
that
thing.
way. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that I really do believe that competition organizers have heard that message and are trying to make a change in that regard.
That's good to hear. All right, event number 1, a chipper style test, 15 box jump overs at 42 and 32 inches, 30 sandbag squats at 80 and 60 pounds, 45 GHD sit-ups, 30 pistols, 15 deficit strict handstand push-up. We're on parallettes, right?
They were on parallettes, and the programmer for this, as you see in the bottom right there, QHP, that's Elliot Simmons and his team. They intended for these to be ballistic blocks. When they found out they were parallettes, they changed the deficit. It ended up being, I think, 10 centimeters for men and 5 centimeters for women, which is about 5 to 6 inches and 3 to maybe 3 inches.
60, 48 cals on the assault bike, right there, smack dab in the middle. And then you work way back 15, 30, 45, 30, 15. I like not having a buy-in with the bike. I like putting that in the middle. Did you see that really being a place where most athletes were just kind of like actively recovering from what they just did and then saving it for the back half? Or how did you see this unfold live?
I saw a massive difference in strategy to the 15, 16, 60 / 48 and 15, basically depending on your proficiency with the strict handstand push-ups. So Annika Greer is a good example. Ripped through them, one of the first to the bike. Like six women in her heat got off the bike before her, but she ripped through them again and beat them all back to the next implement. So she just like sandbagged the bike, knowing that she could do the handstand push-ups in 1 or 2 sets, where everyone else would take 3 to 5, and she got right back up into the lead. The inverse to that was like Luka Jukic. It's a tough movement for him. This is probably the strict deficit handstand pusher was probably like the biggest crux of the weekend for him. I think he managed to work out really well, but he knew he was going to have to break on the handstand push-ups either way. So he wanted to make some of that time up on the bike, and he felt that aerobically he could recover from that. So he pushed the pace on the bike and probably had a faster split time than most, and kind of made up for the fact that he knew he was going to have to take 1 or 2 extra breaks compared to most of his close competitors in the handstand push-up.
With the sandbags. Well, first of all, when I looked at this, I like the high box jump over. I think the hands on, right? You could do the hands on.
It depends.
You had to jump on, but you could use your hands to get
Okay.
off. That was how the rule was written. Maybe the application was variable.
32 inches is a little weird for the ladies.
Yeah, and the weirdest thing to me about this was that it was presented with inches and centimeters in the same.
Inches, centimeters, and pounds going on. I know, totally.
Yeah, and actually, there were some problems with the customs for some of the equipment. So they didn't even have sandbags. They were D-balls, basically, sand balls. And the weight was a little different than that. They had to make a few changes to the tests very late in the game based on equipment showing up or not showing up.
With that number, do you think the intent was, like, I think that 80 and 60 pounds, man, like that's sneaky because.
Sneaky shitty.
I mean, like everyone, all these athletes, 150 and 100. So all of a sudden you're like, 80? The hell's 80 pounds? All right. I guess I'm going to go 30 unbroken, huh?
This I do think this is quite a clever workout design. So basically, the first 15 box jump overs, even though they're high, it's right out the gate, first thing of the weekend, first movement. They're not that hard. The
Yeah.
last 15, after you've done 30, 60, 90,
Smoke
120
your-
squats, counting the pistols, and 60 cows on the bike, that looked like a max effort jump for some of the athletes by the back end
believe
of
it.
this.
I believe it.
I like this one. I like the length of it. I like the movement changes, right? You got the explosive jump into the squat, into the GHD, and then back to the pistols, where those three all put together do not help your pistols. So it's not like the most casual 30 pistols in the world.
No.
And then
Were they
all of
alternating
that-
or was it one leg?
Alternating legs, is 15,
Like
and
old
then
school
advancing
style?
another 15.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
and then the strict parallettes, like 15 and 15 on either end of 60 or 48 cows on the bike, like that's difficult. And it looked like you either had it or you didn't in a sense. And like, if you didn't, then you really couldn't make it up anywhere unless you were marginally okay with it. Like you were talking about, like Luka Jukic.
Yeah. I think that I think the strict handstand push-up, like you look at that thinking, okay, do I have handstand push-ups? But what I see that as is that's your recovery for your legs.
Yeah.
Because it's a slow down. Like if it was regular handstand push-ups, you'd go through that so fast and you wouldn't have any sort of break for your legs. But if you have these athletes that are doing breaks on the 15 handstand push-ups, and I think generally speaking, people aren't going to try to hammer the bike. They'll go through the bike because they know they have to come back hard on that back end. They know what it felt like coming down too. I mean, they know exactly what the sandbag squats felt like. And now knowing that you have to go pistols into the sandbag squats, you're like, oh, okay.
And there were very few athletes. You had to do 15 and then advance, and 15 for the sandbag squats and the pistols. And in the first round, no one dropped the sandbag. In the second round, you could tell that there were people that had no desire to drop it, but they had no choice but to drop it.
Yeah, that's a sneaky.
I like
the other thing I really liked about this was the placement of it. I think back, there's only 7 tests, or even though it's 4 days. And what does 7 tests remind you of? That's a regional. That's a semifinal. Right. And when I think about regionals specifically historically, when does the chipper often show up? Middle to back half of the competition. I like this right out the gate. It's a different. I think that you can have variability in the programming, even with the same number of workouts and style of workouts that you choose, just by mixing the order up a little bit. So I kind of like this one out the gate.
I think that they also had, Elliot Simmons, that he was good at these type of events. So I think you have a really good type of athlete that really understands all those different pieces and what that's going to feel like all the way through and what that intent should feel like all the way through.
We were really fortunate to have him. He came on the broadcast, I think, every day.
Yeah, I heard
gave
that.
some insights and some perspectives, and he was very self-critical. He was very analytical. I mean, his passion and intent was really high. And off the broadcast, I was able to talk to him. And this is something that I don't know, because I haven't had a lot of conversations with people like this. And I don't know that many people who program for 3,000 athletes. He seemed to care just as much about all of the divisions that they program for, not just the elite ones, which was really cool.
Good. That's an artiste right there.
Yeah, care about all your work.
Yeah.
All right, switch gears from event 1 to event 2. 42, 30, 18 chest to bar pull-ups, 21, 15, 9 snatch. The weight increases as you go from 21, 15 to 9. Men go from 65 kg to 85. Women 45 to 65, which is, what was it? Basically like 135, 155, 185-ish for the men. And then women kind of like a 95, 115, 135.
Chase, do you know what the name of this workout means?
No, what does it mean?
Facilito. It just reminds me of you. Couldn't be simpler.
Yeah, and you think about what we just did, because when you first look at this, I'm like, damn, that's a lot of pulling. It's a lot of pulling up from a hang position to a chest to bar to the pull-up bar, and then pulling from the floor to overhead. A good combo in between. Those snatches towards the end, I think, force people to squat more than maybe they could have anticipated going forward. Legs being a little toasty from the first workout or first event of the day, and adding in a bunch of pulling that we didn't have in the first event, which I did like. And I like the volume of chest to bars versus, say, 21-15-9 of this. I think it made the pull-ups matter more. And then increasing the weight each round from the 21 to 15 to 9, I really did like.
This was, I mean, and I'm very partial to pull-ups and snatches or overhead squats. I mean, we've talked about that even in the text thread yesterday. You guys were talking about your little rowing workouts. And when I get, you know what? Don't worry about that. I'll be over here doing pull-ups and overhead squats. So when I saw this one, I was like, hell yeah, like this one, like the numbers. And you're right. I think it's important that they double up on the pull-ups, because 21-15-9 for any level of intermediate athlete up, that's a waste of time. So I think that that's really good to double that up and go chest to bar as well. I love that the snatch weight goes up, and it's not like you're having to snatch 225 or like, some crazy number. It forces these athletes that, okay, I can do these as unbroken as possible. How many on that last set, Brian, were you seeing a lot of singles, or were they able to do like chunks at a time?
For the snatch,
Yeah.
there were a few athletes that would do 3 in a row. Everyone
That's about what I would
did
think
singles
at.
throughout the entire workout.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
I was looking at like people doing big sets on the pull-up bar and then singles almost kind of like to recover a little bit on the snatches.
Yeah.
Again, it was super athlete dependent. If you knew you could move that last barbell well, then I think you had a lot more room to kind of play with how you wanted to approach or attack it. And for some people, they were even a few athletes and good athletes that had to start squat snatching in the middle round of 15 towards the end.
So, I like that event.
Yeah.
But Bill, I have a stat that you are going to love.
Give it to me.
Of the top 11 men and top 11 women on this test in particular, 19 of the 22 finished in the top 11 by the end of the competition.
Oh, really?
9 men and 10. No, it was 9 men and 9 out of 11 and 10 out of 11. Women and men that finished in the top 11 on this finished top 11 by the end.
Interesting.
So is this our indicator test for the weekend?
Not only is it the indicator test for the weekend, it's one of the highest correlates I've ever seen.
I mean, that percentage is definitely one of the highest. And what do you know?
Well, it's upper body pulling, right? Isn't that what we've kind of started to kind of worm our way into, to say that that's about what it should be looking like?
Well, I was going to say classic CrossFit, but you can go that direction too.
I mean, yes,
classic. Simple, effective
it's just
test.
Simple, right?
Simple, effective test with high volume gymnastics and high skill weightlifting combined together in a couplet, which like none of this was too high skilled. None of this was too heavy. It allowed the athletes to compete against each other without anything interfering, right? Even the chip work to a certain extent is like, okay, how is your high volume work capacity with local muscle fatigue, especially in the legs and the upper body with the handstand push-ups? Do you have the stamina and endurance to maintain whatever position you were on the bike? Like there's a lot of pitfalls there. As Brian said, is like, it was kind of all over the place in people's strategy. Here, yes, it was athlete dependent, maybe like how you wanted to approach the barbell and number of sets you do, but nobody got out-programmed in this event.
Well, in your elite level athletes, it's just like what you said, it's a step up in technicality, but not over technical. Like it's not a super heavy snatch where you need to have super extra precise movement. All these athletes are going to be able to move that bar. They already did it in semifinals. They all know what it feels like. All these guys and girls have done 185, 135 pounds at a heavy snatch. And it's not overly technical or overly fatiguing with like a bar muscle up. Like a chest to bar pull up now for these athletes this is everyday run of the mill. So now you're right. You're talking volume in gymnastics. You're talking moderate weights with the weightlifting, and because of the intensity that you're working at, there's your monostruct. There's your conditioning part. Do
you know what this would be a perfect event for?
Me.
The quarterfinals.
Oh, dude, yes.
Like the final event of quarterfinals.
Yes.
Chase, say the name.
Facilito. My son can say it better than me.
That is definitely true.
What we've been doing is like he's if you guys are just joining us or haven't heard before, it's like my kids go to a Spanish immersion daycare. Now my son is in kindergarten, so they don't do Spanish. They actually do twice a week for 30 minutes, but he could teach the class if he wanted to now. So after school, I put on cartoons, but like, I don't know if you guys know this, but like on Netflix or Disney Plus, you can pick like what language it's in now, and it's just all that. It's awesome. So like, I'll put on Bluey, but I'll put it in Spanish, and he just sits there and watches it, and it's crazy because I honestly, I don't know if he really understands what's going on, but like, it doesn't bother him. And the other night,
if you don't know any Spanish, that's not going to work that well for learning it. But if you know even a little bit, I did this when I was living in the Dominican Republic. I would just put on Spanish music, Spanish talk, and just have them in the background, and I'd start to pick up more and more on the language.
Yeah. I mean, how many times do you hear people like that's how they learned English was like from sitcoms? Because and Brian's right. If you have some semblance of the language, it does help put some of these things together. It's like, okay, when I hear that word, they're alluding to this, or this is how it works in a conversation, which I thought was neat. But my son the other day, I know I'm getting off track, but I was putting him to bed, and he goes, "Dad, how do I know how to speak Spanish and English?" He's like, "How does my brain do that?" I was like, "I don't know, man." But it's really cool because now he starts to recognize, he's like, why can I just like switch on and off in between these things randomly? It was, I have heard this too, Renata. I've heard this from so many people, like friends help them learn English. So, all right, let's go to event number 3. This was I think one that got the most buzz leading into it because it is the lifting event, but it all started with as Brian dubbed, the mono rope, which I thought was great. 3 rounds, 90-second window, 50 double unders with a mono rope, and then a one rep clean and jerk, and then you basically got 3 attempts. I like seeing the heavy thing in there. The next day, because look, we had the 2 events like we just talked about, and then the next day was just this. This is the only event for the day that they had. Switching from snatch to clean and jerk, fine, right? I like seeing something heavy. Watching the mono rope, because I was like, anytime there's programming, I don't really love doing programming shows before I see it, because it usually just changes the way you view. I'm not a fan of the mono rope. Like, I'm just not. I'll just say I'm not a fan because it's like it just made everybody look silly.
Well, 20% of the athletes would agree with you because they never got to touch the barbell.
And it's not even the difficulty thing I'm talking about. It's just how they looked.
I think that's one of those tools that if you're going to do something like that, everyone should be able to test it and know it ahead of time, because you're right. Then it affects.
They gave him time.
How much time did they have to?
It was the first announced test. It was announced 3 weeks before the competition.
Okay.
More than enough time. I need a day.
I tried it the day of the test, and I felt like if you gave me a week, I could have figured it out.
So like, the first time I ever used one of these, it was in Carson, California, and it was at RX Smart Gears.
Yeah, with Dave. Yeah.
And Dave came out. He's like, "Hey, I'm making this. I'm making this for the adaptive division. Can you try it?" And I tried it, and like, it's not that hard to figure out. And I'm not saying this is a bad thing to throw in there because it's too hard, especially like Brian says, with 3 weeks of notice.
Yeah.
Plenty of time, more than enough time. But watching people do it, I was like, everyone just looks like they're bunny hopping and I was like, just give them double unders, man. Or give them heavy double unders to affect I'd rather them use a movement to affect the lift from a physical standpoint than a frustration standpoint.
I agree. The title of the test is lifting test.
Yes.
So like, if you're going to have, I mean, we've done it a handful of times. We've done it in regionals before, where you got to, each one of your different lifting stations, you have to do a handful of double unders beforehand. And, at the NCC, they did it where you had 50 double unders, where it's just kind of a little bitty distraction in between. But when you are doing something that's kind of takes over, either, like you said, Brian, athletes that didn't even get to the lift or didn't get a good enough lift off of it, like that's,
Well, let's just say it. Look, Elena Cartatala-Sanahuya, Games athlete in 2022. She got 31st on this test. She couldn't do the jump rope. She had 11th or better on every other test, and she missed the podium by 2 points. No money.
Oh my gosh.
All because
Yeah.
of yeah.
And she's one of the strongest lifters in the field. She might have gotten second overall in the competition.
There you go.
Oh
She
my
wasn't beating
gosh.
Karen Frey, I'll tell you that.
No.
But everyone else was in her line of sights potentially.
But yeah, it was just one of those things where put the double unders in there. Fine.
Right.
Put them in there.
Yeah.
Just we don't need to get cute here. And you know, that's trying new things. I get it. But if I were giving an honest opinion after watching it, because I already had my reservations, I'll be honest. I was watching it with a critical eye. I'm not going to lie. And then after I saw it, I go, yeah, this is exactly what I didn't want to see.
Well, when I saw it, the first thing I thought was, are they going to make him do it like an adaptive athlete? Are they going to force him to do it with one hand?
How could you imagine?
Well, I mean, because otherwise,
well,
why
I'll
would
tell
you
you
have them do it? You know?
There's a guy that was so they did the broadcast in Spanish as well. It was on DAZN, and the commentators were named Albert and Rodri. And Albert Naugle is his name, although I dubbed him Albert Fuego, which means fire, because he was when he was in the zone on the broadcast, he was quite impressive. He learned how to do these with one arm. He's multifunctional athlete, no problem. And he was doing them with one arm, and we were all struggling to do them with two.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
I
like lifting tests. I like free lifts. I like a little monostructural bind to throw people off because it's not just pure strength. But if I'm just giving an opinion, heavy double unders would have been fine. Regular double unders would have been fine. If you want to add a skill pressure element to that, then just do regular double unders and make them unbroken. Everyone should be able to do that. And if you miss, 50 double unders takes 30 seconds. You get 2 opportunities.
Right.
Maybe 3. Put some pressure on them, fine. But look, hey, trying new things, whatever. All right, that was the only event for day 2. Then we move to day 3. And we have, I'll say it is like El Parque, which just means park, like a playground.
I'm getting all bilingual on us now, but this means park for all of you English speakers.
I'm like, hey, what did you do today? He's like, vamos a la parque. I was like, cool. All right. You went to the park. Got it. 5K run with a plate carrier, 45 pounds for the men, 35 pounds for the women. And you're coming off a lifting event.
No plate carriers.
Oh, no plate carriers.
I wanted to make sure about that.
Okay.
Problem with customs. I do think that some of them arrived in time, but I don't think that the crew had enough time to make sure that because there were, first of all 2,800 athletes did this test on Saturday morning at some point. So they were the logistics of that is massive, and they didn't have enough plate carriers for every male, female, and team athlete to have their own. So they would have needed to make sure that they had, and they didn't get them in enough time to have confidence that they had gotten all of them and could actually execute it the way they wanted to. So they just scrapped them entirely, which, given all of the circumstances, I felt like in the moment was the right decision.
Yes. And now, correct me that I'm wrong, Brian, was the course, I believe I heard it was 2 laps. Is that correct? Was it
I didn't go on the course. I don't know. I did hear that it was 2 laps, but I remember
Peter.
Sure.
We asked Peter, and he said he thought it was 2 laps, and that in the middle of each one there was a significant incline as well.
There was definitely a massive hill with a big incline, and if there were 2 laps, and they ran it twice.
Yeah. Now, do we know how official this distance is?
If you trust the watches, it was about 5.2.
Okay, so a sketch or a touch longer. And the times are pretty reflective of that. I mean, you look at Lazar Jukic, which we know is a great runner, 20:30 for a 5K. Travis Mayer, 20:42. OJ Keene, 20:45. Like sub 21. I think people understand sub 21 in a 5K is absolutely legit for a multi-purpose athlete. Like if we're talking about Olympics, sure. I mean, 1,000 pounds back squat versus a 500 pound. I get it. Like specialization out the window. Like these are legit times, especially on the course like this, which is why when, we're at the games and I'm seeing like 16s and 17s from 4-person teams, I was like, no fucking way. like no way. And that's not 0.2 kilometers short. Like it's about half a mile as
I
we.
will tell. I'll give you this insight from the athletes. That mono rope caused a lot of soreness in the calves. That affecting. That
Ooh,
was the mono rope
pounding
was
a
a
bit harder.
Friday night. Yeah, and the mono rope was Friday night, and this was the first thing Saturday morning. So they had 24 hours off from Thursday night to lift and
Hmm.
jump the rope, but then they had like less than maybe 12 hours off, and they also had to sleep and eat and whatever, and wake up and get ready. And the calves were definitely feeling it,
Okay.
which will also be relevant. I think it was for the teams later on in the weekend,
Okay.
but But yeah, that was definitely a factor. And then they had this weird thing after the run. They had like 9 hours off until the
Oh, wow.
Saturday night test.
Jeez.
Interesting. But I mean, coming off a 5K, a sustained effort like that. I mean, 9 hours, that's a long time.
It's a long
Almost
time.
too long.
There was another hill at the very end. They had to run up the loading ramp into the stadium,
Oh, yeah.
and that would look. I mean, and look, I told you, all 3,000 athletes did this, and there was some very devastated athletes going up that ramp at the end of that run.
That ramp is significant, by the way.
It
I've been
is.
like that ramp is legit. It's a long and steep for the end, right? We're talking what, maybe 100 meters? That's
Yeah,
long.
maybe 200. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very yeah. So, I like the 5K. I like some long aerobic test in there coming off the lift, and even the first chipper, heavy on the gymnastics in a sense. So, we've touched a few different bases here. So I think we're moving in the right direction. So day 2 going into day 3, you have the burpee maker. So we've switched languages as we switch events. For time, 75 burpees over the bar in a 2-minute window. Every 2-minute window, I'm assuming, Brian, starts with a 16 and 12 calorie row into 12 thrusters at 40 and 30 kg, which is 88 or 66 pounds. And then max bar facing burpees, basically have 5 sets to get there. So effectively 75 bar facing burpees for time with those buy-ins each 2 minutes, which is just shitty.
Dude, ugly.
God.
If they should have just named, not burpee maker, should have just named it puke. It's gross. It's gross.
It's completely evil and super low barrier to entry. Pretty
Yep.
much everyone can do these things.
No, that weight, the fact that it's less than 95, 65, or it's like kind of
Yeah.
right in there. Like all these athletes know exactly how fast they can go on that. It's so bad.
It's
But
good.
do
And
they
so
want to?
1612, I mean, gosh, what were the times they're getting? So 1612 at a conservative pace, so you're not going to kill yourself. What, 40 to 45 seconds?
Oh, the athletes were finishing the buy-in. It would range from a minute to a minute 20, maybe a
Yeah.
minute to a minute 30 was the range as the rounds progressed.
Yeah, so it's like 40 to 45 on the row, 20 to 25 with transition times on the thruster. So yeah. So they had 40 to 45 seconds or 40 seconds to get through these?
Some of them were faster. Some of them had like 55 seconds in the
Damn.
early rounds. I know, they're savages, man. It's crazy.
That's wild. And then I saw some things at the finish line. Was it the women's elite heats where they had to cross the finish line for the time to stop, not finish the 75th burpee? So some people had to do the whole buy-in again.
There were
and then
two
run across the
things.
finish line?
There were two things about the way that the design of this test was implemented. It was briefed they executed on the floor the way it was briefed, which if you're a competition organizer, you must do that. Even if you're watching and you know that you screwed up the briefing, you have to follow through on what you briefed, even if it really is not ideal. You should hopefully have thought about those things ahead of time. There were two things that I didn't like about the way that they implemented this. The first is that during the rest interval, let's say you did 20, because you had to advance the bar after 20, 20, 20, 10, and then you did 5 in the last one, and you had to cross the finish line. If you did 20 in the first interval, and you didn't move your bar, you could still move your bar during the rest interval.
Okay.
But if you did finish the 5 at the end, and you didn't cross the finish line, you couldn't cross the finish line. You had to do exactly what you just said and go back and row and thruster again to do no more burpees, just to cross the finish line. The main reason I didn't like that is, to me, it seemed inconsistent. You could progress something as you were going, but not at the very end. And their justification was, well, that it's not a rep to move the barbell, but it is a rep to cross the finish line. My counterpoint was, it takes time to do both. So you
Right.
shouldn't allow either, or you should allow both.
Mhm.
The other thing that I did not like, and Travis Mayer took full advantage to this, and it's not on Travis, this is a competition thing, not an athlete thing.
Sure.
There was no specification about how far you had to roll your bar within like a 5-meter zone. So he rolled it 1 inch into the zone, started doing burpees, and then during the rest interval, he rolled it all the way to the end of the zone.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's smart.
Yeah.
It's smart,
give him
but
that.
it was the difference between him winning and Yonakoski winning it, because Yonakoski was rolling it to the middle every time.
Mhm.
And there were some judges that were asking their athletes to roll it forward and others that weren't. So overall, I felt like in a test that had small margins for error at every interval, those are the only 2 athletes at all to finish in 3 intervals, which I thought was perfect, dude. There were a couple athletes that got time capped, 2 that finished in 3 intervals. The best finished in 4, most finished in 5. It was really, really, I thought, well designed for this style of test, which is a hard thing to get right. But it was small margins. There were like 10 people within 10 seconds on the men's side in one of the margins.
Mhm.
And those little things could potentially affect many points. They had big payoff implications at the end of the competition. So I didn't love that about this, even though I thought the test in and of itself was awesome.
Yeah, I mean, you got the leg drive and pull with the hinge on the row. Then you have the leg drive and stand and press with the thruster. And then the burpee is just full body gymnastics movement over the bar. Like, yeah, this is good.
It's really
And
good.
because of the 9 hours of rest, I mean, I talked to Lazar.
That's a good point.
I talked to Lazar and Luca. They went home. They had a big meal. They took a shower. They had a 3-hour nap. They woke up. They did mobility. They had another meal. They were fresh. They could attack this thing.
That's a good point. Good point. I like this one a lot.
Yeah, a lot.
Yeah, I like this one a lot. As you said, point margins. Travis Mayer wins this at 7:53, and Yonakoski only 4 seconds behind him. So yeah, barbells and positioning do make a difference when it comes to that. All right, event number 6. We have 3 rounds for time. Handstand walks, basically stairs and ramp is the obstacle. 25 cal ski, 12 and 9 ring muscle ups, handstand walk back, ramp to stairs, move a chest piece, 3 rounds.
Just for people that are listening, 20/15 cal ski. You said 25.
Sorry, 20, /15 cal ski. So you got inverted obstacle ski with ring muscle ups, which I think is terrible. I'm not terrible, I'm like bad. Like just the same kind of interference we saw in the previous one of movement patterns, like a ski erg with that core flexion into the pull, and ski erg blows your triceps up a lot. In fact, probably more than any other muscle group when it comes to ski. And then the ring muscle ups, where the hardest part is the damn dip out of the rings. Like this is and then the handstand. Wow, man.
I just like with the skier, you got that flexion from the top half coming down. Within the ring muscle up, you have the bottom half coming up.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all midline. I mean, depending on how you're working it, but you're working the top half and then bottom half right into, and you have to. I mean, you got to go all in on those because all the athletes are going to be decent. I mean, for the most part, at this point now, with the stairs and the ramp, like we've done that. We've done that enough times now. You would think that, like, for the most part, athletes would be decent. Granted, until their midline starts to blow out,
or their upper body stability from that press out. But the I like the stairs to ramp is generally harder than the ramp to stairs. And a lot of programmers like to put the hardest thing last. I liked that the hardest implement was first on this because even the ramp to stairs got difficult for a lot of the elite athletes as the rounds progressed.
Yeah.
It's interesting that it is ramp to stairs. You saying that'd be the more difficult one or the easier one?
Easier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But just
So
and what it is, it's the stairs because you need way more shoulder strength and tricep stamina to press up through a step than you do walking up the ramp. I hated the steps every time I do this damn obstacle.
Well, because you're literally pressing up on one hand. With the ramp, you can come up incrementally, small hand steps, whatever you need to do to work the balance, plus lean on that one side as you're pressing out. The steps, you don't get to make that decision. You have to go up the 3 inches or 4 inches, whatever it is, to make that step.
Yeah.
The
I like
cool
this.
thing about the cool thing about this one played out was it reminded me of legless finale with the men, where everyone was looking at each other. Do I go?
Oh yeah.
Am I ready to go? Okay, he's going. Is he going to make it, or do I just watch and see, and then whatever? And there were a lot of people there like, he's going, I have to go, and then one of them would
Yeah.
make it, one of them wouldn't make it. So you could put the pressure on the other guy, or you could say like, okay, let's see if you got it or not, and if you do, great, you'll get the points, and if not, I'm going to take an extra 10 seconds because you're going to need 30.
Was
I
there a
think-
distance that they had to walk, including
Very
the ramp?
small.
Okay.
Very small. It's like maybe 2 feet or a meter on either side of the obstacle. And I thought it was suspiciously short, that distance on either side. But the way that it played out, I actually think that for what this was meant to be and the way it fit into the weekend, that it was brilliant.
I think it's actually it's pretty cool because it's not a skill, the handstand walk with the obstacle, that is unfamiliar. But now with that short distance, I mean, you have to push going up and down that ramp. You don't have the lead in and the distance after that you can kind of work, or have handstand walk where a lot of athletes can basically sit there and do a foot race on their hands. You have to nail that with some precision up and down. And it's easy to kind of fudge your way through just a flat ground, but it's more difficult on a up and down object that you're trying to move. And then after multiple times when you're doing it under fatigue, I think it's awesome.
Lazar Jukic told me he hasn't missed a handstand ramp in an obstacle in 2 years. I think he missed 8 times in this test.
Oh,
Holy
shit.
shit.
Wow.
What about this one too? Because the way it reads, people may not understand it, but like the amount of local muscle fatigue in this, in the smallest muscle groups that are the only things that can actually keep you upright, fast on the ski, or dipping out of the rings, right? Rear delts, triceps, all your stabilizers in your shoulders. And once those go, it doesn't matter how strong you are.
Right.
Right. If you don't have those. The other thing too is that, okay, the way it reads, you're like, all right, handstand walk over an obstacle, this cow ski and ring muscle up, and then handstand walk back, and then right back into the obstacle again. Right? So you're turning around, you're coming down the steps, and then you're going right into the most difficult part of the obstacle, back into it. And after that first round, you do that double up. You're like, oh, shit. Uh-oh.
Yeah.
There were many athletes that took their time moving that chest piece.
How far did they have to go with the chest piece?
I think it was a 5-meter move.
Each. Okay.
So they had to move it 5 meters twice, and then after the last one, they had to run 20 meters to the finish line.
Okay.
People ran that 20 meters very fast.
What were people doing on the ring muscle-ups on, say, your top 5 athletes on the men and the women's side?
This is what I thought was cool about this. Annika Greer managed to do all the sets unbroken, and she won this test because of that. Karen Frey, who I would say overall, no one was surprised she won. I was very impressed with her execution test to test, and especially on the gymnastics, the strict handstand push-ups, the ring muscle-ups, and the handstand obstacle course in particular. She did 3 sets every time, and she still finished in the top 3. So, but she was making up 10 seconds on the field on the ski, I would say, and she didn't miss on the ramp. So you could be selective about where you were good, and you could capitalize on different elements of this combination. So I thought that again was a really cool feature of this one.
And I like that a lot, because like if you're a weapon on the handstand walks, it's like, not only am I efficient, it takes me less time. That means I'm less fatigued. If I can go fast here, I can afford breaking on the rings, which will also keep me less fatigued versus, say, someone else who has to. I like that.
Yeah.
I do like that. I like this one a lot too.
Totally.
And it filled a need in the competition up to this point, which was a test that was definitely muscular fatigue and gymnastics focused.
Mm-hmm. And then, so going into the final event, which I don't know if they actually like posted on their Instagram, but the final event being, Brian, walk us through what the final event was.
It was called Iberus. Iberus is a reference to Iberia, which is the peninsula that has Spain and Portugal on it. And it is a type of ham that they produce there. So instead of the pig, this is Ruster, the equipment provider's version of the pig called the Iberus. I thought that was very clever and obviously appropriate for the setting. And you had a buy-in on the assault runner of 400 meters. and then you had a couplet after that, 3-2-1 on the ropes, 8-5-3 on the flips with the Iberus. For the men, all of the rope climbs were legless. For the women, the first one in every round was legless. The rig was, you had to touch the beam, and it was 16 feet off the floor.
Okay.
That extra foot matters and
Yeah.
mattered for some athletes.
Yeah, I would say that a lot. And what I like here is that you have basically a slight WMD triplet finale. You've got the flips up and down the field. I like the way they broke up the number of flips that they did, which was 8, 5, 3, as you said. So 8 flips down the floor, 5, and then the final 3 across the finish line. I like that as well. I like this whole setup because you have another sneaky, local muscle fatigue that we didn't necessarily have in the previous event, which was more of in a pressing situation. And then here with the legless and rope climbs mixed with the pig flip, which I feel like everyone thinks like, oh, the weight. And I was like, the grip on those things, because one is there were places to put your hands, but there's not a lot of good grip to get on those. Unless you put your hands in those back slots. And I saw someone do it. I was like, please don't do that again. You are going to break every bone in your hand when that flips over.
Well,
yes, JR is very particular about the engineering of those things. And I told him, I said, because he was very impressed from the way that it looked watching it on TV. And they did have the slots in there that had a nice round to grab and pull it up. The transition out of there was awkward and as you're talking. Parts where you could grab it from had a little bit of a rough edge and required definitely, everyone I spoke to said it's more grip than you think.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we've seen exactly, rope climbs in, well, we'll say pig flipping rather than Iberus or whatever you call it. But we've seen we've seen what that has done to, we've seen what happened to Matt Fraser when he had that. He's like, couldn't do a rope climb. Well, that was because it was grip. And this is that exact same setup, going into that, where you're being forced on those legless, you're being forced on it's grip all the way through. So that's a nasty couplet between those two back and forth.
I liked it as a finale. I thought there were some great races at the end, especially on the women's side when it came down to, was Elena trying to get into that podium spot and just had to vault herself? Was she in the final? I think she was in the final heat, but there was. I remember there's just so much going on in point systems. Is I think she missed it by 2, and then the 2 girls behind her maybe tied 1 point behind her as well. It was tight for that last podium spot.
It was crazy on the women's side. So Karen Frey was a runaway, and she was incredibly impressive, as we said. Annika Greer seemed to have control of everything and had a perfect execution of this. I was very impressed with her on the whole weekend. I mean, look, if you look at her results, she had 29th place on the run, and she was upset about that, emotional, but she had told me later on in the weekend that she's like, I ran well for me. It was just a good running field, and I have to just accept that. Everything else was really impressive. So they were kind of 1 and 2. Sylvia Garcia, despite that burpee thing, cost her 20 points. She still had 20-point lead, or 18 or 20-point lead on Elena Carratala going into the final. Keep in mind, Elena Carratala got basically no points for lifting, which she's very good at. And then there was Turi Helgadottir and Emily Lundberg that were in Norcha Blecker, which were somewhat in range. And I said on the broadcast, I was like, they're not out of it, but everything would have to go right. And for I don't think is your leaderboard updated?
Yeah, here you go.
Oh yeah, it is updated. Yeah. So you see how close it ended up being. So I was calling on the broadcast. I'm like, because I knew Holly Tynan had that time that came in, so I didn't think Lundberg had done enough. Also, I wasn't sure if she'd beaten Annika Greer or not. They ended up tying on that. They get that to the second, where there were no tenths of seconds or chip timers, so they tied on that. And I was like, I think Elena Carratala and Sylvia Garcia are going to be within 5 points based on my rough math from the previous year. She didn't have a CIS link or anything like that. Well, and then I went down to the floor because we were way up, broadcasting from up high behind the sound barrier, so YouTube wouldn't block the feed from the music.
Oh, nice.
And it actually was
weird.
It was a really good vantage point to see the floor. It was difficult to see inside the rig. That rig outside of Zeus is the most massive and impressive rig I've ever seen. When there were 40 athletes doing ring muscle ups at the same time, it was not shaking. It was amazing.
Wow.
They had 4 spots for handstand push-ups in a row on the same plane. They had 4 spots for wall balls facing that. You could have put 4 ropes up there if you wanted to do. They had 4 sets of rings in every lane. It was really impressive. But I went down because they were doing podium ceremony for every division. 3,000
Okay.
athletes, however many divisions there were.
Yeah.
And then we were going to do a quick post-show broadcast anyway. So I was down on the floor. I was actually talking to Emily Lundberg and Simon Mantilla. They were the last people I talked to before I went back upstairs. And I had no idea that she'd finished third. I didn't even check the leaderboards. I was like, it's going to be Elena or Sylvia. I get up there. Greg's already up there, and he's looking at the stream, and he's like, why is Emily Lundberg on the podium?
Oh.
And I'm like, oh my God, did the perfect scenario happen? And I still haven't seen the leaderboard. So I like text Hanu. I'm like, can you send me a screenshot of the leaderboard? Because he's right down by scoring. And he texts it to me, and I scroll over, and I'm like, it was the perfect scenario.
Wow.
And she got on there by 2 points.
That's wild. What a close race on the women's side. That's awesome. Karin Frey. I know she's been not to say one of your favorites, but someone that we got to see really showcase her talents in Dubai, I want to say 3 or 4 years ago. And you could tell
2019.
Yeah, you could tell that, God, time flies, that there was a lot of promise there. Should she continue working on weaknesses, getting more experience and training and competitive landscape, and now what she's been doing at the games the last couple of years. She got her braces off. Obviously, that helps in competition. But her growth as an athlete, and then what she did here at Madrid. What are your thoughts on her? I know it's early, but coming off this 2023 season, going into that 2024 season, I feel like she has strong potential to obviously be a top 10 athlete, but maybe in a couple of years pushing into that top 5.
The top of the women's division in CrossFit right now is extremely interesting, exciting, and competitive. If you just look at the women that were in the top 10 this year, there were a few surprises. Ariel Lowen, Alex Gazand, for me at least, outperforming what I expected well within the top 10. You look at people like Alexis Raptis, I think she's only getting better. Paige Powers only getting better. You wonder about athletes like Katrin David's daughter. Is she, with all those others coming up, is this as good as she can do, and how long can she hold on to that? Annie was just outside. Same question for her. Will Mel O'Brien ever compete again? Will Haley Adams ever compete again? Emma Carey's not going anywhere. Tia's coming back most likely. There's not a lot of room inside the top 10. Karin Ferre has all the tools that are required to be in the top 10, but there may not be enough space.
Yeah. God, look at these names.
And tell me who of that top 10 is so old that they're going to move out of the way. The only ones you could even consider pointing to in terms of age being a limiter for them finishing the top 10 next year are Katrin and Ariel.
Yeah.
And based on what I saw from them this season, it's like, I think they could do it again, especially given that we've seen women like Annie, Cara, and Sam continue to be competitive well into their 30s. Even Brent and Pat are continuing to do that on the men's side, which is more difficult to do. And then you add in, I mean, the thing is that like the older athletes, Emma Tall, Emily Rolfe, Annie Thorzeder, even Bethany Flores, they're just on the outside. But then like I said, if you throw Tia, I don't know, I have no idea about Mal, but let's just throw Tia and Haley back into the mix.
Right.
Yeah. And look at those scores. Look how tight that is. I mean, it's not like there were like these big chunks of people either. Like it's, 5, 10, 15, 12, 10, 5 points. It's tight.
But Brian, I feel like it was a year ago, maybe 2, that we weren't talking about the women's field like this.
No.
It was all about the men's. Like the men's field is so tight. It's so heavy at the top. There's no way you can, it's so hard to move up 2 spots once you get towards the top 15 and the top 10. And now it seems like there's a death hold in the top 10.
Yeah, and I think, I do think that, Tia and Matt had some impact on that. When there's one person that's just so good, it's like draws so much attention that sometimes you maybe miss out on it. But I think there's also just ebbs and flows to that. And like we just said, most of those women are between 18 and 25 years old. So they're all elevating. They all still have a minimum of 5 years of relative competitive in their CrossFit in their future if they want it, and still can maintain the discipline and passion for it. And I think it's an incredible dynamic that we have on the women's field for several years ahead of us
Look at this.
at the very
Paige
least.
Powers, 20. Daniel Brandon, 27. Emma Carey, 19. Catherine Davis-daughter, 30. Alexis Raptis, 24. Gazan, 21. Magawa, 24. Lowen, 29. Lawson, 18. And Horvath is only 26. Like, geez. All right. Well, hey, that's exciting to see. On the men's side, I thought it was pretty cool to see. Obviously, you see Travis Mayer back in the mix, and the way he performed in this field. As we said earlier, it was Lazar Jukic that won the overall weekend, with Jona Koski getting second, only 20 points back, and then Travis Mayer third.
I went down there, and the lead were obviously last to go for the award ceremony, so they were at the back of the line. And where I came down from the broadcast area, they were closest there. So I saw Facundo. He was with Karen and Lazar. He coaches both of them now, and so I got a picture with them. Lazar, the first thing he says to me, he goes, "I'm like, are you happy?" He goes, "I'm happy, but Jona beat me on 5 of the 7 tests. Feels a little weird."
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, yeah, that's but well-roundedness will do that. I mean, how many times?
The next person I saw was Jona.
Okay.
And he's like, and I told him that, and he was laughing about it. And he's like, "Yeah, but I just totally screwed up the lift. I missed my second and third lifts."
Oh, he
just took full responsibility on that. If he hits either one of those, I think he wins.
Man.
Wow.
And then Travis Mayer, 10 points behind Jona Koski. How did Travis look overall?
It was so great to see. Everything about Travis Mayer that weekend for me was amazing to see, refreshing to see. It was his presence prior to the competition, his demeanor throughout, his focus on the floor. He was thriving, and at the very end, we did something that I thought was kind of cool. We, and I know that not everyone can maybe do this, but we interviewed the winners after the podium ceremony.
Okay.
After the final heat of the final test, we did 2 interviews. Because we had Josie Astula there as an MC, he speaks Spanish. So we interviewed Martin Cuervo, Elena Caratala, and Studio CrossFit, 3 Spanish-speaking entities that we had not spoken to all weekend, and that was primarily for the crowd on site and the DAZN audience that was listening to the Spanish broadcast. And then we interviewed another athlete in English that Bella Martin did those, that we had brief to no interactions with. And so we talked to Travis at that point. We talked to the Danish team, Fleck X, which is a very good team that just missed the podium there. And both of those people, Travis and then Victor Munter, who represents that team, they said something that I think is extremely high praise for this competition in general. And they're like, "Yeah, man, like we have a great time here. There's a reason we come back every year, and we'll be back again."
I mean,
Travis is as far as you ask me, like Travis is back, and he looked great, and he looked like he was enjoying himself, which you guys know is just as important as your ability to execute on the floor, is that you want to be there and you're enjoying what you're doing. He was competing hard. He had I even felt like he's a competitor, like he wants to win.
Oh yeah.
And he was like, he said in that interview, Bella asked him a question. She goes, "What did you learn this weekend?" And he goes, "Oh wow, great question." And he goes, "Every second counts, every kilo counts." On the lifting test, he lifted 154 kilos. 5 men lifted 155 kilos.
Oh, wow.
He would have beat Jona for sure. Yeah. He might have beat Lazar. Yeah.
1 kilo. Wow.
And it was like, it's such a genuine interview. The things that he's like, that response, "Oh, great question." And then to say something like that, I felt was like an incredible insight into his mindset, validated the other thing that he said about the competition and about his mentality as a competitor, that like, even immediately after, he knew that, he remembered that, and he'll take that with him.
He's always been one of those athletes that has, when you watch him, he has one of the overall best mindsets as far as longevity competitor goes.
Yeah.
He's laughing and having a good time before he goes. And when he's in, he's all business. And when he's out, he's like, "Well, dang, how was that? Well, that would suck." He's all goofy and silly. And it's like, he really knows when to put the emphasis of like, head down, go to work. And the second he doesn't have to head down, go to work, he can take a very honest look at it. Doesn't seem to take himself, too seriously or over seriously. And I don't know how the hell the guy does it with as many kids as he has.
Dude,
That guy is a
pisses me off
beast.
so much.
Now, granted, he always taught, and what the other thing is, like, he always gives high praise to his wife. Like, I could not do any of the stuff I do without her doing all that. But I mean, just being at that level, being able to train that way, keeping his head space where he does, knowing that he has half a baseball team, in the minivan waiting for him. You know what I mean? It's crazy.
Yeah.
And I just want to say this, just in case any partners of someone who's competing competitively in CrossFit is listening to this, I have had a few conversations with athletes and or their partners at these competitions that I've gone to, and originally it was with no intent, just being genuine with them. I had said to someone's partner, I said, it really takes a lot to support someone who wants to pursue this sport. And then I got a message from the competitor a couple of days later that is basically was like a long message saying, you have no idea how much that meant to her and means to me that you said something like that. And so just to echo what Bill's saying is, like, if you're supporting someone, but if you're with someone who's competing in this sport, especially if you have kids, my goodness, you mean a lot, like you matter a lot. And I hope that you know that.
Yeah, it's incredible. And we're glad that they, make the sacrifices that they do to support that, because as fans of the sport and seeing what these athletes can do, I think it's great. So, all right. So end of the weekend, exciting finishes. Good to see some athletes back in the mix. Nice to see some athletes taking the next step forward. Now let's look at the programming overall from a macro perspective before we give our review. And the big thing, if you guys remember, is I think last year was probably one of the worst reviews I've ever given on programming. Was at the Madrid Championship. There was a lot of things that went into play there. Size, time constraints, scheduling, equipment that were forced upon, number of people that could do things. There's a lot of things that constrain that. I would say is that there are still ways to make things good without like all the bells and whistles, but this one, 4 days, all day to do these things, 2-1, 2-2 as far as number of events, allowed me a bit more freedom there. However, it wasn't a wild amount of new things thrown in here. You look overall between weightlifting, monostructural, gymnastics, those three modalities that you program within. There's 5 weightlifting, sandbag squat, snatch, clean and jerk, thruster, and then the pig flips. You look at monostructural, there were 6. In fact, 6 of the 7 events had monostructural within them and made different capacities, intervals, long duration run, short duration run, buy-in, skis for rounds, rows for intervals, in that bike with a big chunk in the middle. And then gymnastics, there was 9. So 5 weightlifting, 9 gymnastics, 6 monostructural. So a little heavier on the gymnastics in that capacity. Time frames, 14 to 16 minutes in event 1, 8 to 10 minutes in 2. You had your little heavy day. Run 20 to 22 minutes. The interval tests ranged from 10 to 12 minutes for the majority of people. I know some did faster and some did a little slower. 7 to 9 minutes for the event 6, and then 5 to 7 minutes on event 7. So a good range of times, and the bulk of your time frame of that like 8 to 12 minute window and some more classic CrossFit tests were there. You had something outside the 20 minutes. You had something that was a heavy day, and then you had something that was an interval test. Within that, you had chippers, you had couplets, a lot of mixed match of modalities. So WMG test 1, GW test 2, mono W test 3, monostructural only test 4, weightlifting monostructural gymnastics test 5, gymnastics and monostructural test 6, and then weightlifting monostructural gymnastics and test 7. So looking at all of this, I know it was a little heavier gymnastics, but there's nothing I look at that was like overpowered. In my opinion, you had, handstand push-ups, you had pistols, you had GHD sit-ups, box jumps at a high jump, you had burpees off the floor, chest to bar pull-ups, handstand walks, muscle-ups, legless, like, I thought there was a great balance. And when I'm looking at this in total at the end of the weekend, I think this is a fantastic programmed event. Probably one of my top ones in the off season so far, and top including the game season that we've had. And I'm going to give this like a 1.7. 1.7 for me on the programming. I thought they did a great job. Really great job.
That's huge. I would have to echo the fact that I think that well programmed for an off-season event. I do think that there were. I actually liked the amount of gymnastics things that they did. I mean, you talked about it being a little bit heavy. I think that this is a perfect time to have that sort of level, to have that increase, because, as the athletes are talking about, they weren't beat up. They don't get beat up by doing pull-ups and ring muscle ups. That just doesn't happen, not for these guys. I think that even though they did get below parallel, there were the thrusters, there were the the snatches once they probably got to there. Some of the leg work that was happening in the first, and the pistols and stuff like that. I wish that they could have gone a little bit heavier on some of the weightlifting stuff. I think that having just your one, the weightlifting with the stupid jump rope deal, I like personally, I think that they wasted that one event. Honestly, I'm over every single event having to have a 1 rep max. We've seen it in like every single event now is happening. It's like they do something in a 1 rep max. They always have to have that. I'm waiting for someone to do like a touch and go for 5 unbroken or something where it's like, okay, you don't just give that one beast the one chance every single event. I think you can very well, especially early in the season. I mean, when you have the games, when you have 15 events, okay, you can do. We've talked about this a whole lot of times, where the more events you have, then you can start having your single modality tests. I would have really liked to have seen the 5K with the bag like that, make it more of a ruck setup instead of it just ended up being. I understand why they did it. I would have done the exact same thing. I'm just bummed that it turned out that way. I would have rather been more than just a regular run this time in the season. But as far as everything else, I love the chipper. I love the chest to bar and the snatch event. The burpee event was, I love those kind of intervals where you have to buy in, and then it's like, okay, everyone's gonna get the shit kicked out of them. And now let's see what kind of work you can do. I love that setup. I think it's amazing. Granted, you could have cleaned it up or whatever, but like on paper, that was amazing. So I mean, of the 7 events that they had, there were 5 that I thought were just fire. They were great. I'm gonna go like a 155.
Ooh, all right. You got
I thought it was good. That was really good. I just me. I wanted to go a little heavier. I want it to be a little heavier.
I think that's a fair critique.
So, what do you think, Brian?
Come on, Brian.
Line them up.
No, I mostly agree with you guys. I think that the main things that I'm docking them for are the jump rope standard having a effect on the weightlifting test. That I didn't love that element of it, and the ruck run, I completely agree with Bill. Prior to either of your rankings, I was going to give it a 1 3/4 thumbs or a 1.75.
Cool.
All right. All centered around the same thing. I think we can all agree on is that huge bounce back year for the Madrid CrossFit Championship from last year to this year. Elliot Simmons and company, golf clap for you. Well done.
Great.
I really like the test. A little bit heavier in there, probably to balance some things out. But that being said, is like Karen Frey still won.
Yeah.
And she's more well known for being able to move bigger weights better than, say, the aerobic endurance and the high skill gymnastics volume. So I feel like that could be a testament to her evolution as an athlete, like we just talked about a little bit earlier. But congrats, Madrid. Brian, thank you so much for joining the show. Good luck in the rest of your world tour for yourself. And where can people go to get more, I would say, information on what you're doing? And, I know you're talking about some write-ups, some podcasts. Where can people go?
Yeah, everything that I'm doing for the most part is on Be Friendly Fitness on Instagram and on the website, BeFriendlyFitness.com.
Awesome. Well, Brian, thanks again for your time.
Yes,
You guys have a good rest of your weekend.
Bye, guys.